In this video, I want to give you some tips for working with your dreams so that you can better understand them and better understand what the message that it might be sharing with you, what that message might be. And before I begin, I wanted to tell you a story because I've always been so interested in dreams. And they're fascinating from a psychological and spiritual perspective, but I've always been curious as to what conditions need to be present in order to give us a dream that is thoroughly meaningful in a way that affects us in our waking reality. And some of the things that I've personally noticed are situations where you kind of feel like you're desperate, you don't know where else to turn, there's sort of a sense of despair or hopelessness. For me, when I've been in those situations in my life, that's when the dream can come through and really just give us a piece of information that we need in order to move forward. And just to share an example with you guys, I've written about this in the past, so this might be familiar to some of you, but if not, I went in for routine lab work a couple of years ago, and I wasn't really expecting anything to come back. And about 2 days later, I get a call from the nurse, and the nurse says, Hi, Miss Mola. We have some difficult news for you. Your labs came back abnormal in a pretty significant way. And she said the two diagnoses that they were considering, both of them were deadly. One a little bit more quickly than the other, but both of them were incurable and fatal illnesses. And I remember I dropped the phone because I thought, I don't know what happened to me, but I went into like a complete terror mode. And I picked up the phone again and I said, is it possible that you made a mistake? Like, are you sure you're looking at my labs? And in like the most calm and collected voice, she's like, no, these are definitely yours. And they came back from the lab today. Everything was done correctly. And so she asked me to come in for further lab work to differentiate which of these two things it was. And I felt completely paralyzed, and I couldn't go back in. I didn't want to go back in. It felt almost more comfortable to not know and to have the possibility that something, that they made a mistake or whatever it was. And I just, like, the next couple of weeks of my life were just complete hell. Like, I couldn't think of anything else. And sort of at the end of my rope, like when I finally reached complete emotional exhaustion, and I realized that I was completely stuck in this place unless I went in for further testing and they determined what it was. I knew that I'd be stuck here. So I had a dream, and it was such a fascinating dream because I was in this chaotic place, and it felt exactly how I felt in my waking life. So it was this total chaos, and I get a phone call from my doctor's office, and she says in like the calmest voice, she's like, hi Renata, if you could come in, that would be great. Just want to discuss your labs with you. So I'm rushing to the clinic and I'm terrified and I'm just like so nervous. And this is why I love dreams, by the way, because in the dream you just go. And so I went in, she sits me down. She's this young, beautiful doctor, completely calm. There was nothing clinical about her office space whatsoever, which put me at ease. And she said, I just wanted to let you know everything is normal. Everything is totally fine. We messed up your labs. And she told me exactly what they did wrong with the testing. And she said, but you might want to get outside a little bit more. And that actually, I woke up out of that dream and I just felt totally calm. And I knew that it was time. I was ready to go and do the further testing that they wanted to do. But having that dream allowed me to take that next step. Up until that point, I was literally in a state of paralytic terror. That's the only way I can describe it. And interestingly, when they ran the labs again, everything did come back normal, except vitamin D was low, which is fascinating because in the dream she said you might want to get outside more. And in waking life, actually, what ended up coming out of it is that they did mess up the test. They didn't do it properly, which is exactly what this doctor in the dream had said. So that's just one example of a dream having a profound impact on my entire being and allowing me to move forward in my own process, which I think is so important. And one of the ways that dreams really shine. And one of the reasons that I think it's so important that we keep track of our dreams, that we are deeply in touch with our dreams if we are dreamers, because not everybody dreams. But if you do, then my recommendation is try to understand them a little bit better. And, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a situation where you're desperate and completely at your wit's end. Powerful dreams can come to us at any time. I just know for myself, they seem to come when I'm metaphorically on my knees and just not sure where else to go. So anyway, I just want to give you some tips on how you can work with your dreams. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do is to write them down. When we write our dreams down, we train our brain and we train our subconscious mind to remember them. And that's a big first step, because a lot of people say, I know that I was dreaming, but I can't remember what it was about. So when we get into the habit of writing down our dreams, we tend to remember them more frequently. So when you wake up and you've had a dream, especially if you feel like it's significant or if something has stood out for you, it was a very vivid dream, or if it's a recurring dream, those are good ones to start with. So write it down and just write down everything you remember from start to finish. Then leave it and come back to it in a couple of minutes and go through the dream again and just write the dream again and slow down. So as you're recalling things, as you're writing it, just go really, really slowly through the dream. And see if you can recall something that wasn't there in your first recollection of it. And you know what this does is that it allows us to become aware of aspects of the dream that maybe we weren't aware of in the first time that we were writing it down. So an example of this might be, you know, let's say in the dream you're walking through a hallway to a party. In the first time that you're writing it down, you recall what you're doing, you see the people that are there, you recall sort of like the more superficial things. But when you do it a second time and you're like really in the dreamscape, you recall, for example, that the wallpaper on the wall is red. Or you recall the interior decoration of the place, and you recall a specific plant or, you know, a specific type of couch. All of these things are potentially important. So it's good to get as broad and as thorough as a picture as you can about the entire dream. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to look at what is your experience in the dream. What are you doing? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What's the entire experience? Often dreams will have an emotional tone to them. So, you know, sometimes we're feeling jealous or we're angry or we're surprised. Pay attention to strong feelings and pay attention to layers of feelings, because it's not always just one feeling tone. So an example is you feel jealousy, but if you investigate it further, there's also a sense of curiosity and there's also a sense of anger, let's say, just as an example. And the reason that it's important to get in touch with the experience is that our dreams, I believe, are sent to us from our subconscious mind to bring our awareness to something. So, you know, everything that you're experiencing, everything that you're seeing is somehow connected to you. So another thing that you can look at is, are you your current self? So are you your own, like, let's say you're 35 years old. Are you 35 in the dream? Do you know that you're 45? Do you know that you're 8 years old? How old are you in the dream? That's an important thing to look at, because if you're, you know, let's say you're 8 years old and you have a sense that you're 8, what happened at that age? Why did your subconscious bring you back to that age? What is it about being 8 years old that it's trying to share with you? So, you know, just recall, see if anything comes up. And then also just looking at what are the symbols and images in the dream. So it's not uncommon for people to dream about people, about animals, about plants, about just symbols and images. So if any of those things are present for you in the dream, please just note them, write them down. And, you know, sometimes people will dream about celebrities, or I mentioned animals. And the reason I bring up celebrities and animals is that, again, both of these things are things that we don't necessarily know about. Like, we can recognize an animal the same way that we can recognize Brad Pitt, for example, but we don't actually know anything about Brad Pitt. from on a personal level. We know what the tabloids say, but we don't know who he is as a human being. And same thing with a lot of animals, right? We don't necessarily know who they are, or what they represent, or why they're showing up for us. And so one of the things that I want you to do if you dream about another person or animal or whatever is just observe it. So note a couple of things. What do you notice about it? So let's use the example of an animal. Let's pretend you're dreaming about a lion. What do you notice about this lion? Do you get a sense, is it male, is it female, is it young or old, healthy, sickly? What's its general attitude? Does it seem friendly? Does it seem ferocious? How does it feel to you? And then beyond that, what are you doing? Like, how are you interacting with this animal? Are you, is it coming at you? Are you just watching it? What's your relationship to this lion? And you can kind of go beyond that as well and just free associate. What do you associate with lions in general? When you think about a lion, write down all of the words that come to mind, all of the characteristics, just everything that you can think of. And try not to judge it. Like, don't filter yourself too much. Just say anything that comes to mind. Because what most people notice is that there will be certain things that most of us associate with lions. So predator, a large cat, royalty sometimes, or bravery or things like this. But then there will also be traits or attributes that are specific to you. And I find that that's kind of where the magic is in terms of dream work, is that stuff that's completely unique to just you. So pay attention to that. And what else did I want to say about that? Oh, right. So a lot of people will tend to go to a dream dictionary first. And what I'll invite you to do is actually just do your own associations with it first, and then consult a dream dictionary, because I actually think doing both gives you a better picture of the entire thing. So, but the reason that it's important to associate or to understand your own associations with that animal first is that keep in mind that this image, this animal, everything that's coming to you in a dream is specific to you, and it's delivered specifically for you. So even if you wake up and you're like, God, I have no idea what that has to do with, just trust it, be patient, and do a free association and see what comes out of it. The reason that it's a good idea to look at dream journals, dream dictionaries after the fact is, there are certain universal associations with specific animals or symbols or whatever it might be. And those are sometimes really important to be aware of as well, because very often what I find is that there's a message, or there's an important aspect in each of those things. So in your own association with it, and also the more global general associations that we might have. So looking at both is a good thing. Another technique that you can try is to become each part of the dream. So I had a patient and we were doing quite a bit of dream work, and she would have a recurring dream that she was underground somewhere and she was being followed. And in the dream, she was escaping, she was running, trying to get away from whatever it was that was chasing her. And so in one of our sessions, what I had her do was, so be herself and act that out. Be the physical space that this is happening in, and then be whatever it is that's chasing her. And it was interesting because initially she thought that she was being chased by another person. But when I got her to role play that, it turned out it wasn't a person at all. It was an energy or an entity, I think she said. And then, asking like, what's the message here? So as that entity, do you have a message that is important for us to know right now? And it was interesting in that case because pretty much immediately she was able to come up with something. And keep in mind, this isn't a process that's going to necessarily come out of your rational thinking mind. We kind of have to let the brain go and just allow whatever to naturally come. But anyway, in this case, it was fascinating because as soon as she was able to connect with this entity and get the message, a lot of things in her life started to shift and the dream went away. So, and it was a good thing, right? Because she was starting to get to the point where she was a little bit afraid to go to sleep. She wasn't really sure. Um, it was just a bit of a disturbing dream for her. So she was thankful that this had ended. But what an amazing story of a message that needs to come through that's going to keep on happening. It's sort of like life, like unless and until you get the message, the same situations, the same relationship patterns, all of it is just going to keep coming around. I find it similar with dreams too, and especially recurring dreams. So, becoming each part of the dream. And one of the other things I want to caution you against is taking dreams too literally. Sometimes they can be literal. I've had dreams like that before. But most of the time, I find that our dreams come to us in a way that is metaphorical and often exaggerated. So, one of the things that comes up from time to time is somebody who comes in and they're having dreams about rape, for example, and they're very fearful, right? It's like, oh my God, am I just remembering something that happened? And, we can't rule that out necessarily, but I also think just break it down. Like, what do those things mean to you? What does rape mean to you? What's the experience of that in the dream? And often what'll come up is a violation, doing something that they don't want to do, like being forced into something. And we have to ask, so is there an area in your life where you feel that way? Even if you'd never ever describe it in those terms, is that feeling resonant with you? Like, do you recognize it in some aspect of your life? Because really it's just, the image is just trying to capture your attention. It's trying to show you, like, this is how intense this feeling is. So try not to be afraid of things that can be, or try not to be afraid of dreams that seem very disturbing or just profoundly upsetting, because it's very likely just your subconscious trying to bring your awareness to an experience that you're having or have had in a different context. And then the last thing that we want to keep in mind when we're working with dreams, especially because, lots of people have lots of dreams, but not all of them seem or feel significant. And that's okay. But if you are working with a dream that feels significant to you upon waking, the one thing we want to keep in mind is there a message? Are we getting the message? And so, that's, I would say, don't go, like, allow the dream work to expand and allow it to take its own form. But that it's complete when you and the therapist, or you and your friend or your spouse, whoever you're talking to about the dream, whenever it feels complete, or you kind of are like, oh, that's what it is. It just clicks. That's when you know that it's complete. And something that I've noticed in my own life is sometimes that takes a couple of days. So I'll go through the dream, I'll write about it, I'll tell someone about it, and it doesn't fully click. Like, I know that I'm on the verge, but I can't quite connect it. And then I'll leave it for a couple of days or a week, and I'll come back to it, and it's immediately clear. And I'm like, oh, that's what it's about. Okay, I get it now. So don't worry if it doesn't come right away. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to share about dream work.